Hey guys, it's Brianna, and it has been a long time since we talked about books. As you can see by the title of this video, I decided to combine August and September into one video, and you will see why shortly. But for the sake of time, since we have a lot of books to get through, I am going to jump right into it. The first book that I read in August was The Vanishing Half by Bennet. The thing that really drew me to this book was the cover. It's very vibrant. It stuck out to me. I kept seeing it on Instagram, and so that's why I decided to pick it up, and I'm very glad that I did. This book was originally published in 2020, actually, this year in July, and it is 343 pages long, which I believe is like the perfect page count for a book, and I will read you the description. Twins, inseparable as children, ultimately choose to live in two very different worlds, one black and one white. The Vignez sisters will always be identical, but after growing up together in a small southern black community and running away at age 16, it's not just the shape of their daily lives that is different as adults, it's everything, including their racial identities. Many years later, one sister lives with her black daughter in the same southern town she once tried to escape. Across the country, the other secretly passes for white, and her white husband knows nothing of her past. Still, although separated by so many miles and just as many lies, the fates of the twins will remain intertwined. What will happen when their own daughters' storylines intersect? Weaving together multiple strands and generations, from the deep south to California, from the 50s to the 90s, The Vanishing Half is at once a riveting, emotional family story and a brilliant exploration of race, gender, and identity, and the lasting influence of the past as it shapes a person's desires and expectations. I absolutely loved this book. I would definitely give it 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoy books that have two different storylines that eventually converge together, and this book definitely has that. It has the two separate stories of the two sisters. You do get a little bit of background, which sometimes I find can be a little bit boring, but in this case it was very necessary, and the author did a really great job of making it important to the story and also interesting to read. So you get the background, then you get their two separate stories, and they kind of come together at the end. Out of all of the books that I read over August and September, this one was probably my favorite, so thanks to Instagram for constantly shoving this in my face, because I actually ended up liking it a lot. I would recommend this book to pretty much anyone, but more specifically people who like books that center around family drama and also books that cover the topics of race and gender identity. The next book that I read was In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware, and this was originally published in 2016. It is 308 pages. And I'm going to read the description off Goodreads because Ruth Ware doesn't put the summary on her books. In a dark, dark wood. Nora hasn't seen Claire for 10 years, not since Nora walked out of school one day and never went back. There was a dark, dark house, until out of the blue an invitation to Claire's hen do arrives. Is this a chance for Nora to finally put her past behind her? And in the dark, dark house there was a dark, dark room, but something goes very, very wrong. And in the dark, dark room, some things can't stay secret forever. This book is classic Ruth Ware. You guys know I love her. I talk about her books all the time. Out of all the ones I read, this one was definitely not my favorite. I found myself having trouble connecting with the main character. I didn't really like the main character in this book, so I think that made it really tough for me to root for her. With that being said, though, I am glad I read it. Overall, I think I would give this book probably 3 out of 5 stars. It's definitely not my favorite book of hers. I think if you're really into dramas, you would probably like this, especially crime dramas. But in my personal opinion, Ruth Ware has a lot of better books, so I might skip this one and check something else out of hers if you haven't already read anything by her. And this next book is the reason that I decided to combine the August and September videos together, and that book is The Stand by Stephen King. It is a brick, it's a mammoth, it is a very long book. And I started reading this in August and didn't finish it until maybe halfway through September. And so I didn't feel like I wanted to just make a video for the two books that I just talked about. So I figured I would just combine the 2 months together because this one kind of crossed over into September. I believe this book was originally published in 1978, but then it was republished in 1990, and this is the complete and uncut edition. So there's another edition of this book that is a little bit shorter, which, as I'm going to get to a little bit later, I wish I kind of read that one, not this one, but this is the complete and uncut version, so any of the chapters that may have gotten cut out in the other version are included in this one. This book is 1,439 pages long. It depends which version you get, but the version that I got is 1,400 pages. So it is a
big old boy.
You guys know that I love Stephen King, so that's why I decided to pick this one up. I heard it's a classic of his and I want to give it a shot. I will read you the summary. When a man escapes from a biological testing facility, he sets in motion a deadly domino effect, spreading a mutated strain of the flu that will wipe out 99% of humanity within a few weeks. The survivors who remain are scared, bewildered, and in need of a leader. To emerge, Mother Abigail, the benevolent 108-year-old woman who urges them to build a community in Boulder, Colorado, and Randall Flagg, the nefarious dark man who delights in chaos and violence. On Goodreads, I rated this a 3 out of 5, but I actually think I would probably give it a 2 or a 2.5 out of 5, and that's simply because I think this book is way too long. I think the story could have been told in a lot less pages. I do think there were some really great parts of this book, but overall I would not recommend this one, especially if you're not someone who loves a long book, and especially if you're not someone who loves Stephen King. So if you're not interested in Stephen King and you don't like long reads, definitely do not pick this up. I also think another reason why I wasn't super excited about it is because, as I just read, it is about a super flu that wipes out a lot of the population. So considering we are in coronavirus times right now, it kind of hits a little bit too close to home, to be quite honest. I thought I might enjoy reading it right now because of the parallels, but I think that actually contributed to me not liking it. And I won't say I regret reading this book, because I definitely don't. I'm glad I've read it. Like I said, I do think it's a good story, but I just think it is way too long. There's also way too many characters. And as I've said in past videos, I hate books that have way too many named characters because I have trouble keeping them all straight in my head. So that's what I have to say about this. Like I said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one unless you are like diehard Stephen King. I would say probably stay away from this. The next book that I read, which was very refreshing after some Stephen King giant Bible of a book, was More Than Enough by Elaine Welteroth. This is an autobiography, actually, which I don't think I've talked about any of these in my past book videos, so we've got an autobiography, y'all. This book was originally published in 2019, and it is 336 pages, so it is the perfect little read. I will read you the summary. Throughout her life, Elaine Welteroth has climbed the ranks of media and fashion, shattering ceilings along the way. Now, the groundbreaking journalist unpacks lessons on race, identity, and success through her own journey. From navigating her way as the unstoppable child of an interracial marriage in a small town in California, to finding herself on the front lines of a movement for the next generation of changemakers. Brimming with vulnerability, humor, and hard-earned wisdom, More Than Enough is fittingly much more than a memoir. It is a moving affirmation for anyone who's ever faced fear and persevered anyway. I really enjoyed this book. I would definitely give it 5 out of 5 stars, and I would even go as far as to say I think this is probably the best memoir I have ever read. It gave just enough facts and detail about her life while also keeping it a story, which I think is very important. Sometimes I find that memoirs and autobiographies get bogged down with dates and names and facts and don't actually flow as a story. This did that really well. And the way the chapters were broken up was really nice. The chapters were super quick to read and they each kind of focused on a different thing but all tied together. Overall, this is a very inspiring memoir, so if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration, this is definitely for you. I would pretty much recommend this to anyone, but especially young women who are looking for a little bit of inspiration. Fun fact, Elaine Welteroth is actually a judge on Bravo's Project Runway, and I work for Bravo. I do social media for them, so that was another reason why I was interested in checking this one out, because Elaine is awesome on the show, so I figured I would check out her book as well. Next up was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. It looks like this book was originally copywritten for 1970, and then it was renewed in 1998, and then Toni Morrison also wrote the foreword to this version that I read. This book is 206 pages, so it is definitely on the shorter side, and I will read you the summary. Piccola Breedlove is a young black girl, praised every day for beauty. Mocked by other children for the dark skin, curly hair, and brown eyes that set her apart, she yearns for the blonde hair and blue eyes that she believes will allow her to finally fit in. Yet, as her dream grows more fervent, her life slowly starts to disintegrate in the face of adversity and strife. A brilliant examination of our obsession with beauty and conformity, Toni Morrison's virtuosic first novel asks powerful questions about race, class, and gender with the subtlety and grace that have always characterized her writing. So this is actually Toni Morrison's first ever book. I really enjoyed this. I read in high school her book Jazz, and I hated it. And I'm not sure if it was because I was at a lower reading level at that time, or if it just wasn't the book for me, I'm not sure. I read it for an AP class. I find that when you're reading for school, they're not always enjoyable, so maybe that could be why I didn't like it. So I was very hesitant to pick up another Toni Morrison book, but my mom recommended this one to me and I really enjoyed it. Overall, I would give this book 4 out of 5 stars. The characters in it were really great, and I thought that the story was definitely captivating. I read this super fast. I think I read it in like 2 days. So if you're looking for a book that's an easy read, I would definitely suggest this. However, I will give you a warning. There are some graphic scenes in this book that have to do with sexual assault and rape. So I would definitely keep that in mind if you're thinking about checking this book out. I would recommend this book to anyone who is looking for a speed read, and also anybody who is looking for books that tackle the topic of race and identity. The last book that I read was My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Fredrik Backman. This book was written in Swedish, I believe, in 2013, and then it was translated to English in 2015. It is 370 pages, so definitely in that little sweet spot that I always talk about. And the back of the book says, Elsa is 7 years old and different. Her grandmother is 77 years old and crazy, as in standing on the balcony firing paintball guns at strangers crazy. She is also Elsa's best and only friend. At night, Elsa takes refuge in her grandmother's stories in the Land of Almost Awake and the Kingdom of Miamas, where everybody is different and nobody needs to be normal. When Elsa's grandmother dies and leaves behind a series of letters apologizing to people she has wronged, Elsa's greatest adventure begins. Her grandmother's instructions lead her to an apartment building full of misfits, monsters, attack dogs, and old crones, but also the truth about fairy tales and kingdoms and a grandmother like no other. My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry is told with the same comic accuracy and beating heart as Fredrik Backman's best-selling debut novel, A Man Called Ove. It is a story about life and death and one of the most important human rights, the right to be different. So I have not read A Man Called Ove, but I've heard good things about it. But I happened upon this book when I was in a bookstore and decided to grab it. The lady in the store actually also convinced me to pick up the sequel to this, which is called Brit Marie Was Here. She was raving about this book and said that if I read this, I have to read Brit Marie Was Here. So I ended up buying both. I'm kind of bummed that I bought both because I would probably give this a book a 2 out of 5. I was surprised that I didn't enjoy this one as much, especially because I've heard such great things about this book. It has a really high rating on Goodreads, but personally I found it really difficult to get into. At the end of the day, I did think that the story had redeemable qualities. However, it was just really confusing in the beginning, and I don't know if it was because it was translated to English or if it's just written in a confusing way. But even at the end of the book, I'm not totally sure what I was reading. It was hard to differentiate the actual story from the thoughts of Elsa, the 7-year-old girl that is the main character in the book. It was really difficult to separate her sort of fairy tale and childlike dreamland with the actual story that was happening in this book. I don't know if I would necessarily categorize this as sci-fi, but it did have a little bit of a sci-fi twist to it, I think. It just wasn't what I was expecting, So unless you're into really kooky, quirky kind of books, I wouldn't recommend this. I'm definitely going to read Brit Marie Was Here because I did buy it, but I kind of wish that I didn't buy it until after I had read this, because maybe I wouldn't have picked it up. And that is the last book that I read this month. I will give you a sneak peek at what I am reading currently. I am reading Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. So far so good. My friend Sophia recommended this to me and she actually let me borrow this copy. So you can hear all about this in my next book review video. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed and I will catch you next time. Make sure you leave your book suggestions in the comments below and let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video or if you are planning to read them now that you've heard my review. Thanks for watching and I'll talk to you later. Bye.